So I thought that we would start off looking at some of the prayers that people are, experience on a regular basis, but might not have a lot of depth to it, and hopefully then it gives you more meaning when you're saying them, right? And wanted to start with the one that. Actually, before we start, let's do our opening blessing. Sorry. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Our study today should be meaningful and deep for us. So I thought we would start with the one that people are most familiar with, the Shma. Right? So before I pass out any of the sources that I've got, what is your understanding about the Shma? Where is it from? What do you know about it? What does it mean to you? Whatever.
I have no idea about the historical, where it comes from or anything, right. But I know for me, it's like my mantra when I need comforting.
Okay.
That I use that if I wake up during the night, can't sleep, I'll use it as a mantra.
Really?
It just makes me feel calm and safe.
Nice.
It's interesting, I use it when I fly, as we're taking off, as we're landing.
Yeah.
I used it before each of my surgeries that were pretty serious, so that I was calm.
Yeah.
And because if you go in calmly, it's a lot better than, and it does make me slow me down and make me know that it's not up to me, God's there.
Right.
I'm currently, I'm always immersed in Holocaust studies, but I'm currently really involved in it. I ran Crystal now last week, and I'm one of the co-chairs of Butterflies of Hope and Remembrance, and running an event today. I know that it is said that Jews recited that when they were entering a situation where they knew they would not leave. And I've heard stories about people who were trying to rescue or find Jewish children who were hidden. That they would go around and reciting the Shema and see if children in Catholic orphanages or other places would look up and recognize this. It was a way to find children who had been hidden, who perhaps had no idea why they looked up, but they recognized something. So I really think it's a touchstone.
Wow.
Obviously, it's a
Right.
touchstone.
Right. That's great. That's great. I'd never heard that. Linda.
For me, because it's he's Ehad, I feel like when I say that, I'm one with him.
Right. Good.
And that I feel that oneness with him.
Right.
That's for me.
Great. You could just talk about God as Echad, as one, but there's also this sense that it's all one, right? We're all one, right? We're united with God. Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Anybody else?
It's my connection with, just like Linda said, I feel connected with the temple, with the people, with everybody when I do say it. Relaxes me.
Can we ask questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
So my question is, because I know the literal translation, Adonai Echad, was that a reaction against when they had multiple gods, or was it a reaction to, or God is the one, as opposed to being unity? We think of one as unity, as opposed to, like the Catholics have three, or multi, or whatever. But is it that he is don't like using that pronoun.
Right.
That God is one, or God is the one.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always,
Both, probably.
well, it could be anything, I suppose, it's whatever, like anything, it's what we want to think, I guess, but
Right.
I don't know if
Right.
there is an answer.
Right. Good. Okay. Good. I'll try and look at that as we go through it. Other questions that people might have?
This is not that, but I think everybody here will appreciate it. There's a lady who's moved into Kobernik,
Mm-hmm.
and we had a dinner yesterday, and she's not Jewish, and she spent her career teaching, but she had gone to all-girls Catholic school right through high school. But when she got to college, she went to Brooklyn College.
Mhm.
And she said,
Whoa. New experience.
Immersion.
Wow,
And she
what a
said,
shock.
and she said, that's when I learned what education was all about. That teacher could say something, you could read something, and you could ask, and you could argue back and forth. I said, now you know what we Jews do.
What are we doing?
But she said it was a whole discovery, having lived her life in that very confined
yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
I just want to remind you, the chorale is singing the Hanukkah on the 23rd
Yes.
at Aviva.
Of all places to get her thing at Brooklyn College.
Right.
You're allowed to ask questions.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
She said, you didn't ask questions, the nuns would smack you.
Yeah.
Do you have a policy of saving papers for people who aren't in the?
I do keep a number of them, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
I can get it to
I know
Del
I'll
next
miss
time.
next week.
Okay,
I know
yeah.
Del's not here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll keep them. And as I mentioned last time, I'm recording and I'm working on figuring out how to get them up onto a YouTube channel, and people can, if you want to spend your time that way watching something that you missed here, then feel free, and we'll see how they come out. We'll see. So we find here on the source sheet that the Shema comes from the Torah. It's a verse in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy is probably the latest book of the Torah. It's the last book, but it's also the latest book of the Torah. There's different questions as to when it came about, and it's in many ways a retelling. A lot of the stuff is things that are being retold by Moses of the journey that the Israelites have taken. The Shema it's not repeating the Shema. It doesn't come from someplace earlier, but it's there within those texts. So you'll see that what we know of as the Shema, the 6 words, is one verse. And then it goes on with Ve'ahavta, which people know, the first paragraph, Ve'ahavta. And when we talk about the Shema sort of as a unit in prayer, it's the one line, Ve'ahavta, and then 2 more paragraphs that come from other places in the Torah. We're not going to look at those specifically today, but one more from Deuteronomy and the other one from Numbers. But it's short, it's sweet, and it sort of does lend itself to things as people were saying, like a mantra, right? A lot of times people talk about can your mission statement fit on a bumper sticker, right? 6 words is really what it should be, short, concise, to the point, right? So here it's really the mission statement, or the if we had any kind of credo in Judaism, this is it, right? Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema, translated here as hear, but it has more of a sense of really like listen up, pay attention, right? Be alerted, Israel. Adonai, God. Eloheinu, our God. Adonai Echad, God is one. And this starts to go into what Ronnie was asking about the Echad, and is Echad meaning one as opposed to multiple gods, right? Or one being sort of like the only one, right? And that's a question, right? And there's certainly you can have different viewpoints and discussions about that. I think that it's pretty clear in the Torah that even when we say Abraham was, the first monotheist, I think there's a real question as to what that means in terms of monotheism. Is it that there are no other gods, right? Or is it that there are other gods, but this is the one that I'm following? This is my God, right? And in some ways, when we say Eloheinu, right, it's our God as opposed to other people's God, right? And that's okay, right? Let other people have what they see of as God, and we're comfortable. We can be comfortable with that. We don't have to say, no, you're wrong, right, in your own beliefs. But there certainly was a progression towards monotheism in the way that we know of it today, right? In the sense of there being us thinking that there's just one God, right? As opposed to what the thinking was then, where I've got my God, right? And it's okay for you to have, and you might have other gods. And their thinking then was also that gods were that the God was local, right? Your local area had a God, and we get in the story coming up in a few weeks with Jacob, where Jacob goes on a journey, and he lies down and he sees this vision of the ladder and the angels going up and down, up and down. And when he wakes up, he says, God was in this place and I did not know it. Right? And one of the understandings of that is that he thought that when he left home, right, he left his God back there, right? Because they had that idea that gods were in their particular locale. And that was also a big thing when it came to the experience around Egypt, that, Pharaoh being like, okay, well, your God from back in Canaan, can't help you here, right? It's like, police with jurisdiction, right? It can't cross the county line. So this was really a new idea that our God was everywhere, right? That our God wasn't limited in any particular place. And that it was one, as opposed to trying to figure out, well, I pray to this God for rain, and this God for good harvest, and this God for health, and whatever else, right? So that was another drastic change at the time. Yes?
Doesn't God kind of define himself in Exodus 20 and 22, 20, and then again in 22, where he says he's the creator, and that's why we honor Shabbat, because we're honoring the God of creation. But also, Abraham's father was a maker of idols for other gods. And
right. So
God said, leave that.
Right. So one of the midrashim, one of the rabbinic teachings, not in the Torah, there were rabbinic teachings about why Abraham was picked, why God starts in some ways with Abraham, is because he had this, from the midrashim, he had this innate sense of one, right, of one God. And the story that's told is this, that people are probably familiar with, is that his father had an idol shop and went off to lunch one day and left Abraham minding the store. And a woman came in with a dish of food for the idols, and Abraham then went around and broke all the idols except for the biggest one, and put a stick in the hand of the biggest idol. And when his father came back, he was like, Abraham, what happened? And Abraham said, well, this woman brought in this offering, and they all started fighting over it. And they're just mashing each other and beating each other up. And finally, the larger one, of course, the strongest one, won and defeated all the others. And his father said, Abraham, you can't fool me. They can't do that. And Abraham's like, so why do you worship them, right? Why are you praying to these things that have no ability and no power? That there is one, right? There is a God out there that does have that. So there's this innate sense that Abraham had. That's the rabbinic understanding, of course, as to why he was picked. So that then translates from a real polytheism, which most of the cultures around them were observing, to this change to monotheism. It's not in response to, we have plenty of things that are in response to Christianity, this comes long before that. So it's not in response to a trinity per se, but just polytheism in general.
And if Moses is saying this, he's saying to the Israelites, now listen, because he knows he's not going on with them.
Right.
And he has seen God, heard his voice at the burning bush, and then on the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
He's reminding them, the Lord is our God.
Right.
The Lord alone.
Good.
Nobody else, just him, and you need to, follow this.
Nice. Yep, go ahead.
That story, which I love, I've heard multiple versions
Right.
of it, but it's that story. But all that does is prove that idolatry is wrong, not that there aren't multiple gods. I mean, I'm just pointing that out. There's no multiple gods as idols. Idols can't get up and fight each other, but that doesn't prove there aren't multiple gods. That's just going to point that out.
Correct,
Spirit.
right? There could be that. But it also breaks away from the idea of there being any kind of physical, right, like the sun or the the
Physical
moon, right?
representation
Physical
of that,
representation
yeah.
of God, right? But you're right; it could allow for there being other quote unquote gods that don't have physical representation. But yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to think of other cultures before you get into the other monotheistic traditions, right, that come after Judaism. What are some of the other ones that had gods that they thought were without physical characteristics? And maybe there were, but I'm not thinking of any, right? I think they were all on some level physical, right? So that's another major change, right? Is to really get from something that has a physical structure to something that's completely without, right? And we have still sometimes have that image of sort of the old man up in the sky or whatever else, right? And we get that from a lot of medieval artwork and things like that, but.
And the pronoun.
Right.
Yeah.
And right.
We have
And
to
the
get rid of that.
and the pronoun. The pronoun's very difficult, right? It makes things really hard. Part of the issue, though, is that Hebrew doesn't have a neutral language, right? It's all he or she.
But maybe we should do what the transgenders are now doing,
Right.
just using they.
Right. So that is a possibility. Yes. Yeah.
When
Right.
a transgendered person wants to be referred to as they.
As they. Right. Right.
It's a singular.
Right, a singular they,
The
which we
newest-
use
the latest thing.
we use in
They.
writing sometimes anyway, right?
Right.
Well, he,
When-
she, he's.
when we say
No,
when
I
we
get that.
when
Well,
we-
but
when
every
we-
time you see LORD in caps, it's the tetragrammaton, which is the Hebrew name of God, which we don't say, but is still there and it's still real.
right,
We're translating it.
we're translating it
for-
absolutely right, and that's what we
that
talked about
is
a little bit
the
of
one true
this.
God is
Right.
the Hebrew God, and so you can.
Are you saying according to,
The Bible,
yeah?
Right.
Your Bible.
Our Bible.
All right, right,
now,
right.
and even the Christian
Their
Bible has that same. Believe me, because I'm an interfaith minister. Believe me, it's in there too. They didn't take it out.
Right. In English, mostly in English, but that idea that this is there's different words, like we even see here, Eloheinu is another word for God, and Adonai is another word for, and there, we pronounce Yud He Vav He as Adonai, but there's other places where it's written out Aleph Daled Nun Yud, right? So it's written out as Adonai. So there's lots of different names that we use for God,
Titles,
but this right
Tetragrammaton is his name.
is the
right?
name, right?
But
is
the
the name.
titles, God
Right.
That's for
and
Yahweh.
Lord, that's titles. But
Right.
his name is.
Mhm. Right.
To
Alright.
me, that's what makes it so powerful.
So let's read through the rest of this.
I have to leave now.
So let's read through the rest of Deuteronomy 6:4-7. Iris, you want to read that paragraph? The first text. Hear, O Israel.
the Lord our God, the Lord alone. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Take heart to these instructions which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you walk along the way, when you lie down and when you get up.
Okay. So another thing I wanted to mention before we go look at some of these other things is that in the Torah, the ayin in Shma, you see Shin Mem Ayin, the ayin is larger, and at the end of the line, Echad, the Dalet is larger. And if you put ayin and Dalet together, you get the word aid, which means witness. And in some ways, we're making a statement of testimony here. We're witnessing to something. Adonai Echad, Adonai is one. The other thing is that one reasoning given as to why those letters are larger is if the, ayin, we pronounce an ayin the same way we pronounce an aleph, that is just silent, right? But certainly, even in Sephardic communities today, but definitely back then, there was a different pronunciation for the ayin than the aleph, right? It had like a guttural sound to it, right? There was something to it, as opposed to just going along with whatever the vowel was underneath it, which is the aleph. But if you said it as an aleph and not as an ayin, you might have the word Shema, and Shema means perhaps, right? So we would say, perhaps Israel, the Lord is our God, right? It would change the meaning, and so there's a tradition that's why the ayin in Shema is made larger, so you make sure that you're saying it as an ayin, right? Shema, listen, hear up, right? And then the same thing with the dalet at the end, and some people have a custom of elongating the word and really accenting that dalet, right? So Shema Yisrael Adonai Echad, right? Why do you want to make sure that it's a d? Because what letter looks like a dalet? Resh. Another, right? Right? Hero is the Lord our God. The Lord is another, right? Bringing into question, maybe there are other gods, right? It's not just the one. Right? What's that?
So without the Dalet,
If it would be a resh,
would be
which means another.
which means another.
Which means another, right? Acher or achar,
Okay.
right? Another. So there's really that emphasis that people put to make sure that they don't just trail Shema Yisrael achar, right? That's echad, right? To really make sure that we're saying that it's God is one, or the translation here, the Lord alone, right? That it's echad could mean one, could mean unified, whatever else. Alone, no others, right? That kind of. Okay, and so then we're told how we're supposed to understand this now. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. Observe. Here it says, take to heart, right? These instructions. Impress them upon your children. So teaching them, really teach them to your children. Recite them. Recite these words when you're at home and away. And I think that ties into a lot of the things. I think it was very powerful, the things that people were sharing before about this being a mantra, this being something that you might recite when you're getting on the airplane, knowing, as Ronnie shared, about the whether it be in the Holocaust or other times of martyrdom, that it was the last thing that people said, and even not martyrdom, like on the deathbed, right? It's part of the prayers that are said by somebody who knows that their death is imminent, so it's no matter where you are, at home, away, we're reciting these words. And then the last piece, and this is going to get us into the next section, when you lie down and when you get up. Right? So what do we learn from that last little piece?
Does that mean I always thought it meant you're supposed to say it at night when you go to bed, and then in the morning when you first get up.
Great. Okay. So you say it. It's part of our routine. We're supposed to say it at night when we go to bed and when we wake up. The rabbis then end up codifying it, making a structure out of it by putting it into the evening prayers and the morning prayers. Right? So it's not part of, we talked about mincha earlier. Mincha is the afternoon service. It's not in mincha, right? But it's in shachrit, which is the morning service, and it's in mariv, which is the evening service. There's also a bedtime Shema, right? People actually say it right before they go to bed. There isn't like a wake up Shema, right? It's just later on as part of the regular prayers. That could be. I mean, if you're not saying, if you're not saying a full prayer service, right, whatever that looks like, to take time to pause to say the Shema, like that's checking something off, right? It's checking off both in terms of obligations, if you will, but also just in terms of setting a tone for your day. Great. So that then leads, of course, to rabbinic questions here. And so we go down to the next text, Ronnie, from Brachot in the Talmud.
The Mishnah, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disputed the proper way to recite Shema. Beit Shammai said, I guess that's school, huh?
Right, the school.
One should
right.
recite Shema
Right.
in the manner indicated in the text of Shema itself. Therefore, in the evening, every person must recline on his side and recite Shema in fulfillment of the verse when you lie down. And in the morning, he must stand and recite Shema in fulfillment of the verse when you rise, as it is stated when you lie down and when you rise. Beit Hillel say, every person recites Shema as he is, and he may do so in whatever position is most comfortable for him, both day and night, as it is stated, and when you walk along the way, when one is neither standing nor reclining.
Great. Okay, so let's pause there for a minute, right? We have these two schools that are constantly disagreeing with one another, Hillel and Shammai. There's lots of stories or teachings that we have throughout the Talmud where they are pulling in different opinions. Shammai says, follow the verse. Follow what it says. If we're supposed to say it when we lie down and when we get up, then that means that at nighttime, when you say the Shema, you should be reclining, right? Almost literally like the last thing you do before you go to bed. You lie down and then you say the Shema. In the morning, you say it standing up, right? Because you say it when you lie down and when you get up. And so he's really reading literally what it says in the verse. Hillel says, no, you recite it however you are. If you're standing, you say it standing. If you're sitting, you say it sitting. Why? Because it says, recite them when you walk along the way, when you're going about your normal routines, right? That lie down and get up for Hillel just means twice, and it means nighttime and morning, right? He's looking at that as timing, right, as opposed to posture. Shammai is looking at that as posture. Hillel says, no, the posture you get from the line before when you walk along the way, meaning when you're going about your everyday business. If you are in the kitchen doing the dishes and it's nighttime, right? And you remember, oh, you know what? It's the time for me to say the Shema. You say it, standing there at the kitchen sink, whatever else, right? If you happen to be sitting in the living room, reading a book, and you pause for a minute and say, oh, it's nighttime, I should say the Shema. You're sitting, you say it sitting, right? However you're doing your going about your every ordinary stuff.
You're saying there's no real restriction as to when you're supposed to say it.
Well, when you're supposed to say it is at night and in the morning, right? But Shammai says that when you lie down and when you get up, that's about posture, right? And that's the major disagreement here.
It seems to me the point should be not how, the manner or the posture, but that you say it. I mean,
Well, I have another.
Yes, and
another-
we'll get
Doesn't matter what you
we'll
say.
get into some of that as well in a minute. Right. Go ahead, Iris.
No, I read this and then I leafed through everything because the part for me, oh, you gotta watch me.
I didn't look ahead.
The part that means so much to me when I think about the power of God in my head
Mhm.
is what comes next. And if you follow these laws and rules that I give you,
Mhm.
good things will
Okay.
happen.
Right.
And I'm wondering why the posture is so important.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the importance is what God expects of us
Mm-hmm.
and what hopefully we then expect of ourselves.
Right.
Because, you know, my feeling is we're God's hands on earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's our role, and this reminds us every time we say it.
Right. So what Iris is talking about of what comes next, right, is that second paragraph, which I didn't bring here, but I just started earlier saying that there were 3 paragraphs in this section in the service about that we call the Shma. The second paragraph, the Haya im Shamoa, talks about, basically says, if you follow God's words, if you follow the commandments, good things are going to happen. Rain in the proper season and good crops and so forth. And if not, bad things are going to happen, right? You'll be cast off of the earth and so forth. The land will spit you out. And so, right, so there really can be this connection of sort of belief in God, but to what end, right? If it's just merely a belief, in some ways that this having these two things together, if it's just merely a belief, then what good is it going to do you? But if it translates to proper behavior, right, and we can discuss mitzvot and things like that, right, but proper behavior in some way or another, then there's something behind it, right? It's not merely just about belief, right? Yeah, so we get that, certainly. Okay, Ronnie, keep going. If so,
According to Beit Hillel, why was it stated when you lie down and when you rise? This is merely to denote time. At the time when people lie down and the time when people rise.
Great, okay, which is what we talked about earlier. Go ahead.
With regard to this halakha, Rabbi Tarfon said, once I was coming on the road when I stopped and reclined to recite Shema in accordance with the statement of Beit Shammai. Although Rabbi Tarfon was a disciple of Beit Hillel, he thought that fulfilling the mitzvah in accordance with the opinion of Beit Shammai would be a more meticulous fulfillment of the mitzvah, acceptable to all opinions. Yet, in so doing, I endangered myself due to the highwaymen, who were cost travelers. The sages said to him, you deserved to be in a position where you were liable to pay with your life, as you transgressed the statement of Beit Hillel. Wow. This statement will be explained in the Gemara.
Great.
Wow.
So what Rabbi Tarfon is saying is I can grab onto both of these, right? I can go along with Hillel and say it's about time, and we're supposed to say it in the evening and in the morning, and that I'm able to say it anyway, right? I'm able to say it if I'm walking along the way, I'm able to say it standing. If I'm lying down, I'm able to say it lying down. If I'm sitting down, I can say it. It doesn't really matter, right? So I can do it that way. But I can also be more meticulous, if you will, right, by following Shammai. By following Shammai saying, I'm going to lie down to say it at night, even if I had been walking along the way, as in this case, right, traveling on the road, and he takes a break to lie down and say the Shema, right? The sages, though, say you don't have to put yourself in danger, right, in order to do that, right? If you, in some ways, they're like, if you had died, right? If the highwaymen had accosted you when you did that, you would have deserved it, right? It's like, don't be so high and mighty, right?
Don't put yourself in a position.
Don't put yourself in the position of being in danger, right? When you could have just kept on walking and said the Shema walking.
That's why
right?
he deserved it. That's why he would have deserved
Right,
it.
he would have deserved it because he didn't have to do it that way, right? Yes, you could, right? But you don't have to go to that extreme. The next little chart that's there just gives you a sense of what Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel are saying around these things.
But
Yep.
I want to share something.
Mhm.
It's just, because you mentioned it in passing and I'm dwelling on it. That's annoying.
Yeah, every Wednesday.
Get used to
Every
it.
Wednesday.
It's so bad for the birds.
Every
They're
Wednesday.
so upset.
So I just want to share this with everybody. My father was Orthodox. My mother was an agnostic, bordering on atheism, but very culturally Jewish, which is why I am so confused. So when Mom died, 5.5 years ago, I wasn't with her the moment she died, the day that she died, but my brother and sister-in-law and my sister were there, and they had, we FaceTimed,
Mhm.
so I was watching, and my mother said the Shma.
Mhm.
Really?
My mother said the Shma, which
Right.
absolutely blew me away.
Mhm. Mhm.
It just totally blew me away. I can't tell you how surprised
Mm.
I was
Right.
that she had come to that.
Right.
I mean, lifelong. I'm talking member of the Atheism Society at one point, and then, she explored. She really, truly was an agnostic, I think, but her grandfather on one side was a rabbi, a well-loved rabbi, and grandfather on the other side was a very learned man, but not a rabbi. And I think she felt that they were greeting her. She had said she hoped when she died that they would come for her.
Mhm.
But that blew me away.
Right. But I wonder if, in some ways, something that that Sheila had said before about saying the Shema connects one to the community, right? That still might not necessarily be, and I'm sure for many people that say the Shema, it's not necessarily a statement of faith and belief. It's it's part of the culture, right? You talk about her as a cultural Jew.
Or it could be
It's
fear.
part of the culture, right?
Could be
I
what?
don't fear. I mean, she was dying.
Right. You
I
wanna.
knew she was dying.
You wanna. I don't know if you mean it this way, but you wanna hedge your bets, right? You know.
I don't know.
Whatever
Right.
you know worked for a lot of people, and I believe, I've met a lot of agnostics in my life. I was a hospice minister, so I watched a lot of people at their last moments, and I found it amazing that people who said they were agnostic, at the very end, I think God is close. And I think they recognize that God is close. And even at that point, you can't deny God because he's so close. That's what I got from it in my, experiences with people dying.
Right.
I really think God is close. And we are blessed that we know him when we're not. He's not that close because we're not dying. It's such a privilege, and I'm hoping that my son, you don't know what, but to know that he got that grounding, and your mom had all that background and all that.
I don't know.
Right. So we don't know.
But
So
on the other hand,
right.
last year my dad was died, and he was hit by a car, and so he was in a coma. And so the children, we said Shema for him when we knew
Right.
the time was there, and we all
Right.
recited the Shema.
Yeah.
Because he
Right.
couldn't.
Right. I often will go and recite the Vijui, the confessional prayers, for somebody who's not able to say them for themselves. We see a little bit now in the next text from the Shulchan Aruch, which is a legal code, right, codification of Jewish law, as to, some of how this ends up coming down through the rabbis afterwards. Andrew, you want to read that?
Okay. To sit at the time of the recitation of the Shema and not sleep, containing 9
Seifim, yeah. So this is in the Shulchan Aruch. It'll have a title, and it'll say that there are 9 paragraphs basically, or how many paragraphs there are part of it.
One may recite it walking, standing, lying, riding on the back of an animal, or sitting, but not
Prakdan.
praktan, which is with one's face into the ground or cast on one's back, with one's face upwards. But one may recite when one is lying on one side.
Great. So most positions, right, but not prone on your back or face down,
Or supine.
right?
Why?
Why do you think?
You're either facing.
Pride?
Yeah, I think it has to do with exposure, maybe, right? And how your body is. It's not exactly clear, but I do think that has something to do with that type of exposure. Then you've got in the Shulchan Aruch, there's sort of 2 sections, and they're intertwined. The Shulchan Aruch was written by a Sephardic scholar, Joseph Caro, and then an Ashkenazic scholar, Moshe Isserlis, came and added in pieces to clarify some things for the Ashkenazic community. And it's just sort of like it's interspersed, right? So if it doesn't have anything additional, and in most editions of it, it's like sort of like larger print and then a smaller font so that you can tell the difference. If there isn't the additional stuff, then it's the same for Ashkenazic and Sephardic. But if there is something different, then he adds it in. So where it says gloss, this is that additional piece by Isserlis. Go on.
Gloss, since one was already lying and it is troublesome to stand up, read on the chapter one who's dead.
Don't worry about that, yeah. And
Okay. And if one was very heavy set and not be able to turn over onto one side or was sick, then one includes a little
inclines.
Excuse me.
It's okay.
Inclines a little towards one side and recites the Shema.
Right? So you do what you can, right? If there's any reason why if you're already lying in a particular way, right? And it's too hard to get up or it's too hard to move onto your side, then you can stay, in the position that you are. It still gets to that idea, going back to the first text, of do we make an effort to change our position, or do we stay where we are? And we're going to see now in this next text from Lawrence Hoffman a little bit into this in more modern times. So go ahead, Kate.
Reformed congregation said the Shema standing. Halacha prescribed sitting, not standing for the Shema. The issue goes back to a debate between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, in which Beit Hillel ruled successfully that the Shema would be said in whatever position it happened to be when the time of its recitation arrived. In the 9th century, the Babylonian scholar Amram
Gaon.
Gaon enforced that position as a part of his religio-political attack on the Palestinians who still say the Shema standing. His successful championing of the Hillite perspective eventually entered the codes of Jewish law. When the Crusaders overran Palestine, destroying native Palestinian Jewish custom, in the process, the Palestinian practice standing died too. So that Jews around the world now sat for the Shema as Amram had insisted.
Okay, so first clarification, right, is that when it says Palestinian, right, it's meaning that area, right? It's not in what we think of as Palestinians, right? These are not Arabs. These are not Palestinians that are observing, saying the Shema, right? But that's what that land, what that area was called. I mentioned last week that there's two Talmuds, right? There's a Babylonian Talmud, right, produced out in Babylon, and there's another one that's either called the Jerusalem Talmud or the Palestinian Talmud. And again, just because it came from that area, and showing that the Babylonian tradition was to sit, and the Palestinian was to stand. But Amram Gaon, living in now the 9th century, so about 4 centuries after the Talmud is redacted, comes and says really the right position is to follow the Babylonians, and we should be sitting, and it ends up being an outgrowth of the Crusades, that the custom of standing falls by the wayside, right? Because it really wipes out much of the Palestinian traditions that were going on at the time. Okay? Kate, continue.
Okay. Reformed Jews, however, saw the Shema essential to their claim that Judaism's uniqueness lay in its discovery of ethical monotheism. Wanting to acknowledge the centrality of the Shema and recognizing that people generally stand for the prayers that matter most, they began standing for the Shema despite the halacha. They justified their position by arguing that the halachic act of sitting for the watchword of Jewish faith was inconsistent with the halachic principle of accepting the yoke of heaven. How could one not stand to proclaim God one?
Right, good. Okay, so attention, right? Attention between what we see as the halachic position and what sort of either theologically or intuition, right? Make you just say, like, if we're going to say something so important, what's the way that we say important things? Is we say them standing. And so I would say most, if not, I don't want to say all, but most Reformed congregations you go to, you'll find that they stand for the Shema. There's a story that's told of a young rabbi that comes to a new congregation, and when he gets there, comes to Shabbat services, and when he gets to Shema, some of the congregation stands up, and some of the congregation stays seated. And the people that are standing up start yelling at the people that are sitting down. What are you doing? Come on, you're supposed to sit. Right? And the people that are sitting start saying to the people that are standing, what are you doing? Come on, we're supposed to sit for the Shema. And this rabbi is really confused. And later on in the week, he goes to the hospital to visit an older gentleman who's been a congregant for many, many years. And he says, in the midst of their conversation, he asks and he says, I want to know what's the tradition of this congregation? Do you stand for the Shema or do you sit for the Shema? And the man said, well, explain to me what's going on, what's happening. And the rabbi tells him, he says, we go and they get to the Shema, and some people stand, some people sit. The people that are standing are yelling at the people that are sitting. The people that are sitting, they're yelling at the people that are standing. And the man says, that's the tradition. So we get a variety, right, of ways that things end up getting done. But for the most part,
in my own mind, I'm listening to this and thinking the only reason I thought you stood when the doors to the Torah were open,
Mm-hmm. And we say the Shema.
And that, yeah.
That was my understanding. Good. Okay, so what's interesting, right? I didn't even think about this, right? Is that the Shema on Shabbat morning we say Shma Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad 4 times. Right? If you're there really early, there's a part in the service that it said, it's just very quickly, just that line, and Baruch Shem Kivod Malchut Olam, just that part of it really. And then as part of Shachrit, as part of the morning service, we say Shema and Ve'ahavta, the piece that we read here. And then opening the ark, we say the Shema there. And then the line is in the Musaf Amidah as well, in the Kedusha. So it's 4 times that we say Shema. I guess for 2 of them generally we're sitting and 2 of them we're standing, because we stand when we're opening the ark for the Torah, and we stand when we're doing the Kedusha for the Amidah. So it is interesting, but I think that the specifics, and maybe we'll jump to this next one because of this. The part of the question is, what's your intention when you're saying it? Before I get to it, Ronnie, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. So the covering of the eyes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Good.
So I'm very confused.
I cover.
But not every time I say it.
Right.
Why?
Right.
Can you explain that?
Well, part of that answer I think is going to come out of the next conversation, which is, what's the real Shema, right? When is the time that we're
saying the 3
when is the time that we're really saying it for the purpose of fulfilling the obligation to say the Shema, and when is it something else that's sort of, I don't want to say it flippantly, tossed into our liturgy in other places for various reasons, but not with the intention of it being the time of saying the Shema, right? So let's hold off on that conversation for a second, and we'll read this next text. Linda, we're reading on the back of the second sheet of paper.
Mishnah?
Yep, we're from Brachot 13a, where it starts saying Mishnah.
Okay. The first question discussed in the Mishnah is the question of intent. One who was reading the sections of the Torah which comprise Shema, and the time for the recitation of the morning or evening Shema arrived, if he focused his heart, he fulfilled his obligation and need not repeat Shema in order to fulfill his obligation. This is true even if he failed to recite the requisite blessings, Rabbeinu Hananel,
Ab initio is sort of like before the fact.
Okay. So I'm going to say that again. This is true even if he failed to recite the requisite blessings, Rabbeinu Hananel, ab initio, one may not interrupt the recitation of Shema. The Tanaim, however, disagree over how strict one must be in this regard. They distinguish between interruptions between paragraphs and interruptions within each paragraph. At the breaks between paragraphs, one may greet an individual due to the respect that he is obligated to show him, and one may respond to another's greeting due to respect. And in the middle of each paragraph, one may greet an individual due to the fear that the individual may harm him if he fails to do so, me'iri, and one may respond to another's greeting due to fear. This is the statement of Rabbi Meir.
Great. Okay, so
What did that say?
what did that say?
Did I read it too fast?
Let's no, you're fine. Let's say I'm sitting here, right, teaching a class as I did this morning, right, and we read this paragraph, right, and even if we read it in Hebrew, right, as part of our class, we read Shma Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol. I'm teaching it to you, right? Does that fulfill my obligation to say the Shema?
No,
Why not?
because you're teaching, I think, you're not devoting yourself to God.
Okay, right. So it
At
has
that moment, you're doing God's work, but you're
Mhm.
not devoting yourself to God. You are devoting yourself to your students,
Okay.
in my
Okay.
mind.
Right. So
not
it's
an individual declaration and a witness.
okay.
It's
Even if I was so forget about students, right? Here I am. I'm studying. I'm we're in the week of this Torah reading, right? Deuteronomy, so it's like the beginning of the summer, middle of the summer, something like that, right? And I'm reading it on my own, right? And I'm going through because I want to read through. There's a tradition that you read the parsha 3 times during the week. That you read it in Hebrew and in English in translation, and then maybe in Hebrew again, right? So I'm reading through it in one of these times, and it happens to be morning time, and I'm reading it, right? But I don't have the intention that it's for the obligation for the mitzvah of saying the Shema. So, right, I think that, here it comes down and says, no, right? Unless you focused your heart, right? That you had that kind of kavanah, and it says the Hebrew is kevan, im kevan libo. And we talk a lot of times about kavanah in prayer, and the struggle, the tension between that word kavanah and keva. Keva is like the structure of the prayer, and kavanah is the meaning of the prayer. And we want to, certainly in conservative Judaism, the struggle with that is we want to have the keva, we want to have the structure. There's certain prayers that we think we're supposed to say on a regular basis and so many times a day, and it's built into the system, which ends up leading our services to be three hours long on a Saturday morning, right? That's the keva. The kavanah is, where's our heart, right? What's our intention as part of it? Do we have meaning that we're getting out of it? So, thank you, Ronnie. So he starts off by saying, you only fulfill the Shema when you have the intention that you're focusing your heart on it. So this goes to that. So this goes to that thing. So we've got now four times that I mentioned before that we say Shema on a Shabbat morning. Only one of them really is with the intention of it fulfilling the obligation of saying the Shema. And that's the one in the middle of Shachrit, which has all 3 paragraphs. And that's the one where people have the custom of covering their eyes when they say it. And there's a tradition, you cover your eyes. Explanation behind that is that it's we're talking about Shema, we're talking about hearing, right? And we know that on some levels, if you take away one sense, it heightens the other. So here we are about hearing, but it also maybe gets you focusing a little bit more, right? The intentionality and the covering your eyes and really sort of going inward when you're saying it, as opposed to when we take the Torah out, where generally people don't. I see a smattering of people around the room that go ahead and do that. I'll often, when I'm saying my part of it, because like the leader sings the line and then we repeat it. So when I'm saying the line back, I might close my eyes when we get to just, but maybe not even for the whole line, right? Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai. Right? It's just like just to sort of add a little bit into it. Same thing the other couple of times when we say it, but it's not with the same intention, intensity that we say when I'm saying it, with the 3 paragraphs and the blessings before and the blessings after, and it's got its own little unit as part of our morning prayers.
Doesn't it in Musaf also have the longer?
Nope, in Musaf it's just Shema.
Just the short.
And then just the one line, and then it's only in Shachrit is the full Shema with the 3 paragraphs.
Go through
Right,
things
right.
a million times and not.
And one of the explanations for how it pops up later on, maybe apocryphal, who knows, but one of the explanations is that there were times where we were forbidden from saying the Shema, right? And they would station guards at the synagogue to keep people from saying it. And so then the guards would stick around, and like I said, the service is 3 hours long. So, right, once the guards left, they inserted it again later on in the service, right? And it just ended up staying there, right? Could have taken it back out when that prohibition had been lifted. but it ended up sort of remaining there as part of the service later on.
Almost
Because-
like in your face.
Yeah,
We're gonna keep
right.
it.
We're gonna do it anyway, right? We're gonna do it. So yeah. And then this goes on the question about interruptions. Right? There's a tradition not to interrupt your prayer from Baruch Hu till the Amidah, till you're done with the Amidah. It's a long time. It's not huge, but it's a pretty decent amount of time, especially when people are coming in and going out, and do you say hello to them and that kind of thing. But definitely during those 3 paragraphs of the Shema, there's a tradition of not greeting somebody else, not interrupting your prayers in any way. But if somebody else comes in, right, and they say hello to you, and it would be rude and disrespectful not to respond, so you respond, right? Or if there's an issue of fear, right, of a foreign king, certainly in their time, right, a foreign king or the leader of the community, right, the secular community came in. If you didn't say hello to them, right, and got them upset, then it would be, could be out of fear to interrupt. So that again, what's that?
Me'iri means
The
that?
Me'iri is another rabbi. They're telling you that this is
okay.
the couple of places where it's got like up above Rabbi Hananel as well. It's telling you that this is the explanation by those rabbis. Okay, so let's see the next section on the next page from Ruth Messenger. Ruth Messenger is I don't know the name of her position, whether she's CEO. She's the head at the organization of Jewish World Watch. Is it Jewish World Watch? That's what I think it is. So, Linda, go ahead. No, Anne.
Parashat
Et Hanan.
includes the words of the Shema, a prayer so important that many Jews recite it twice a day. Our sages are explicit that when we recite the Shema, we must do so with focus, with clarity, and with unity of heart and mind. The essence of the Shema, the imperative to really listen, to pay attention to injustice, and to mend the brokenness in our world, grounds my life with purpose. The difference between hearing and listening is paying attention, finding and living that elusive element of real connection to the stranger or the other.
Right. So when we say the Shema, right, the question is, what are we thinking about? And this is just one example here. There can be others as well. But what's our intention? We talked before that you have to have intention, right? You could just say, my intention is that I know I'm obligated to say it, and so right now I have the intention that I'm fulfilling the obligation. But the broader question can be, what does it lead us to be thinking about? And this is something that all prayer can do for us. But what does it lead us to think about? Linda started off talking earlier about Shema connecting and bringing up a sense of oneness, right? Of being connected with God, with being connected with the divine. I think that same oneness, right? Being connected with the whole world, right? That I am part of this great universe that we're in. And if I'm part of that great universe, Ruth Messenger is saying here that I have to pay attention to it. Right? When I cover my eyes and I'm really listening and thinking and contemplating what's going on in the world, I have to be connected to the other, to the stranger, with whom I am one with, right? With whom I am connected to, through, if you will, through the divine. Maybe if not directly, at least, by way of God, that I'm connected to this person, to the other. That I have the imperative of paying attention to injustice and mending the brokenness in the world. So that's something to maybe give us something additional to be thinking about, right? When we get to this prayer, that no judgment, but and personally could say the same thing, that we get to and we just say, right, because it's part of the liturgy, right? And I think the question is, again, how do we do that for a lot of liturgy, is to really take it to a point where it's has some deeper meaning to us, so that when we're saying it, even if we don't know the words, right? And when I say don't know words, we don't know what it means, right? In English, if I can take that time and say, oh, while I'm saying the Shema, I'm gonna be thinking of what's my role in the world, what's my role in connecting to the other, what's my, all those different things, right? Then it gives me a little bit more. The next paragraph I just brought because it's sort of that sense of awareness. Like, what is it? What was? This is the story of Moses and the burning bush. Right? Here he is going up, and he sees this bush burning. And one of the lines says, it says, an angel of Lord appeared to Moses in a blazing fire. He gazed, and it really has a sense of he turned to look at it, right? And the rabbis ask, like, why does he need to turn to look at it? He's already seeing it. And it has more of a sense of really paying attention, right? That you really have to, it's one thing, there's so much going on in our world that we sort of, it's peripherally, it's out there, but it's not really, we're not really paying attention to it. Even these guys on their lawnmowers, like, they're here, and until they're like right up against us, we aren't really affected by them, but we're still, we're seeing them out of the corner of our eye, we're hearing the noise, right? But when do we focus in, right? And that's the same thing about things in more of a positive way, right? One of the things that we know is out there, but we have to really figure out how to Shma, right? Shma, pay attention, right? And the Shema can be that for us.
I was just gonna say, he was doing his job.
Right. Right.
And instead of continuing to do his job, he said, "What is this?"
Right.
And he went.
Right. So he sort of saw it, right? But then it takes that additional push to say, I'm going to go and look at it, right? I'm going to really pay attention to it, right? And that's how do we move from the things that we sort of see and are sort of affected by, and sort of know we should do something about, to really paying attention to them. And how can the Shema be that driving force for
It's also cool because it's like, you're doing your job and God is there.
Mm-hmm.
God is right there, but when he shows up and you can see that he's there, you need to pay attention.
Gotta pay attention,
It's like
right?
really
Gotta pay
cool.
attention. Right.
It's so cool to think
Right.
of that.
So, any thoughts?
You know?
Questions?
True confessions.
Yeah.
I find, I've listened and I find all of this kind of confusing.
Okay.
And so it made me go back and think about what the Shema means to me.
Good.
And I did think about it in a
Mhm.
couple of different ways
Mm-hmm.
than I had previously.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Well, after this session, I find myself looking at saying it a whole different perspective on it, just not saying it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Really thinking what I'm saying. And that's what this did to me.
Great.
Really.
Good. Thank you all. I'll see you next week.